Well, we're here to talk about addressing the needs of digital age learners. I want to tell you it's the opposite perspective in some sense from what Tom was talking about, in the sense that we three come maybe with three sets of credentials. One is that we are directors, that is Dr. Christensen, Dr. Tyler Wood and I, of a center that Paul mentioned that's been doing research on classroom applications of information technology and home applications for about 20 years. A second role is I'm president of the Society for Information Technology and Teacher Education. I think there are several of you in the room that we'll show in the next slide. We all three have roles there. Rhonda is chair of the research special interest group. Tandra is chair of assistive technologies. But our third and probably most important role is that we are all baby boomers, and our children, I have three, Tandra has four, Rhonda has two, are all millennials. And so honestly, a lot of what we're talking about is from our children. I was also very pleased to get to sit at the table last night with teachers, and I think they're important in the mix as well. So this is an opposite perspective from the learners and a little bit about the authors. I wanted to mention CITE. There are several people in the room that some of you saw last night and will see again. The past president, Ian Gibson, is up in the top. Ian, raise your hand, please. The editor of our flagship journal, Jay Tate, Debbie Sprague's in the audience. Would you raise your hand? And down on the lower right, you'll see Mike Searson, who's chairman of our consultative council. And so there are quite a number of us in the room. I would also mention there's quite a lot of overlap between the Society for Information Technology and Teacher Education and the Teacher Education SIG of ISTE. I think Paul mentioned that Don and I have some similarities. We're number 6 and number 7 among 10 children in our family. So we're very pleased to be here. The younger brother, I guess, is talking first today. So, well, a little bit about the need. I know Paul mentioned that this summit is not interactive, and I think it's very important to talk about the fact that came out of the in June was very much like the topic we've been given today, to establish a clear view of the role of ICT in 21st century learning and its implications for formal and informal learning. There were actually 12 other bullets that came out of that gathering, and I have about 40 sets of the complete paper with me if some of you would like to have copies of those afterwards. I also wanted to point out there are a number of others in the room that were at that gathering. Roland, I didn't show the blackmail picture, so you'll be happy to know that.
Thank you,
And of course, Christine gave a wonderful keynote kickoff to that group. There are several others of you as well. I see Maria. Well, you get the idea. So there is some overlap, and that's healthy because we keep the ball rolling. Paul mentioned the International Handbook for Information Technology in Primary and Secondary Education. I did bring copies of that, and I'm going to pass it around as we're talking, so I'll be back in 5 seconds. It's $2. Some of you know this is about a 5-year project, and if you want to read a lot more about the topic we're presenting on briefly today, I would certainly refer you to the handbook. About half the chapters are online now through one branch of Google, and so you might search for it if you're interested as we're talking. Really, this was released in 2008, fairly recently, in Gothenburg, Sweden, at the European Educational Research Council. The lead editor is the lady on your left. That is Joko Vot of University of Twente, the Netherlands. I've worked with her quite a long time. As well as Hans Pelgrim, who is an IEA researcher, Tiered Plump, who some of you know has been involved in this field a long time, and you'll probably recognize the guy on the right. In fact, I think it's the same shirt I wore last night. So that makes it easy to find me, perhaps. Oh, I have a different one today, that's good. Also, our speaker last night is really the person we should credit, in addition to Paul, for, I think, the handbook being high quality and a great success. There were 17 section editors from all over the world, and we couldn't find a place to get them all together. So Mariana, I think under request from Paul Resta, managed to get us a conference room in the UNESCO building for 3 days, and everyone came, all 17 section editors, and that really was where we hammered out a lot of the issues, and I think the handbook is a tribute to Paul and Mariana. You're providing us with a place. Well, enough for the introduction, where we come from, many hats. I wanted to give you the punchlines first, especially should we run out of time. We probably will. These are sort of pictorial illustrations. In a nutshell, it seems that our current focus right now is on games and simulations, and this is an Xbox 360. They're really good, but the recent data shows that this is still a male-dominated area. It's wonderful, but that's not all there is, and right on the horizon is what we should be expanding to. There are 3 or 4 papers in this year's site group. I would say led by a group from Germany, but programmable clothes and jewelry is really bringing women, girls into digital logic and all these kinds of things that we thought we lost 20 years ago. A little later we'll show more data that indicates that it looks like for the next 10 years, in our opinion, IT and education at least is going to be female dominated. So I know we've been attending to the needs of women for a while, but I would say this is the near-term prospect. And for the long haul, we ought to be working especially with elementary teachers and convincing them they need to get their students back to making things. And probably the digital fabrication area, the Fab Lab, is an area that certainly not only male and female genders can find interesting for different kinds of applications, but we're becoming increasingly interested in minority group differences. And I would say that for some of you that know about Asian cultures, there's a 5,000-year at least history of paper folding, origami, that's quite popular in our country as well. This is not male-female. I would say that with digital fabrication, we can envision there would be a whole new generation of paper folding and three-dimensional projections transposed into 2 dimensions and building up and building down. That is what we really ought to be thinking about. So now that I've come to the conclusion, let's see if we can talk a little bit about why we believe these things might be so. Well, first of all, Tom talked a little about the new generations and baby boomers, and we want to make a distinction that based on our experiences with roughly 500 new teachers we produce each year at our university, and I've been involved in the technology integration course over the past 11 years, that the millennials are not even all one group. In fact, we should divide them into generation 1. That's the ones maybe from 80 to 95. They're now in their teens and 20s. But I don't think anybody expects them to last 100 or 1,000 years as the category. And so it looks like we're in Generation Z, or some people call it the Google generation. They're the students of the millennials that are my students who are becoming teachers. Then there's the rest of us, most of us in the room, we're the teachers. So how many of you are baby boomers? Okay, how many of you are G1s? I think a few. Yeah, 3 or 4. And probably we don't have any G2s in the room, but that's really the focus of the presentation right now. Maybe some born since 95, and perhaps you're like Mr. Button there. Well, if you look at the pie chart of this, it's kind of like that. And actually, Tom's data, which said 53% are baby boomers among the teachers, is probably more accurate. This data is 2000.